there, friends. Welcome to another episode of the No Small Stories podcast. I'm your host, Haleigh Overseth, and this episode I will be joined by my brother, Jonny, who is co-hosting with me, and we sit down for an excellent conversation with CS Brennan. CS is a playwright, actor, voice actor, and is a voice and acting coach as well. He has a lot of great information, not just on the entertainment industry, but I think a lot of insights into how to build a better mindset for yourself no matter what you do in life. So I do hope you enjoy this conversation with CS Brennan. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I'm Haleigh, one of your hosts, and Jonny here is standing in for Shane tonight and joining us. We have CS. Yep. We have CS Brennan, actor, voice actor, also doing some screenwriting and producing. You have a lot of hats that you wear.
Yeah, many hats, one head.
Yep. That's all right. You got to have variety in life, don't you?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
No, thanks for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you. Sure. So we would just love to hear if you can start us off with, so what inspired you to first start with just performing, acting? Where does the creative spark start for you?
So I started off with a very artsy school in New York. That's kind of where I got the ball rolling. We were lucky enough to have a lot of money funded for the arts. The school
nice.
was, yep, the school was very particular in creating a well-rounded education. And I was inspired by my grandmother, who was a performer in like an early Ed Sullivan-esque kind of show back in the 20s. And that inspired me to move on. And I actually started out in classical music. I started out as an opera singer.
Very cool.
Yep. So I was very familiar with the voice, very familiar with how people manipulated their voice in order to present a certain emotion, evoke a certain theme, present a certain message. And whether it was through music or whether it was through public speaking, the two just kind of melded together. And I figured, well, you could use your voice as a tool to guide anybody towards any sort of, message, whether it be through just pure entertainment and or influence them in some sort of way. And that has always just really fascinated me, just being able to craft and use something that we're all born with to be able to influence people to such a degree, and just a pure entertainment value too. It's just fun.
Absolutely. You got to do what you love, right?
Absolutely. No.
Very cool. So, go ahead.
I was gonna say I'm a musician as well, but I have a good voice, I guess, but I'm also a drummer. So
yeah,
those things don't go together well.
Not really. I have more of an imitation voice, I would say. I can imitate singers. I don't really have my own thing though. But I'm not completely trained or anything.
I could hear it now. The tone and the timbre, you could do it. You could have a pretty successful career in voice work. If I'm sure you do more than just this, but no, you've got the right voice for it for sure.
Yeah.
So you also do some voice coaching and teaching though as well, right?
Yep. Yes, I do.
So is that something that is are you doing that sort of freelance, like take on clients personally?
Yeah, for the most part. So I started out after I graduated with my master's in Boston. The main thing, I graduated with a degree in music education with the sole intent on taking what I had and the abilities and the opportunities that I was afforded and presenting them to people who didn't have it. So I taught mostly in the inner city in Massachusetts, back in New York. Because I was well aware of the fact that there are many schools around me that I grew up in. I was in this nice little bubble, but there were schools around me that didn't have those opportunities. So I knew I wanted to go to school to be able to figure out how to give that gift to other people. and public school, like did me wonders, but I found more, creative flow through being able to have my own private studio, whether it be through music or voice acting. I could appeal to each person's individual learning style a little bit better. And so having an independent studio, whether it's, through voice acting, whether we're, I'm helping somebody on a one-time Broadway audition, or I'm coaching through, somebody through dramatic voice work or comedic voice work, and we're working on pacing and timing. I can do that from, the comfort of my own home or through Zoom. And, it's a really, really beautiful thing being able to share that gift with people.
Okay.
That's really, it's a fun sort of thing for me to think about, the like, especially when you talk about like comedic voice training, like that. It's interesting to me that it's kind of, would you say you had a natural ability? Because it makes me wonder, like, how many people like really practice to become that, and how many people are sort of naturally good at the pacing of something like that,
So that's one of the most tricky things, like there's really no good way to teach comedy. It's either you are just kind of, you have the pacing or you don't. There are some like fine tuning things that you can do. I mean, the beauty of voice work is that you can do a take over and over and over, but if you're doing a show, synonymous with like Whose Line, and you're trying to take classes on how to kind of like improv better, like, in my opinion, you either have it or you don't. It's so hard to work on live comedic performances and timing, because you're never going to get that opportunity again. So like I'll take, usually if I'm working on comedic stuff, I'll work on specific projects that people are will come to me for. So they'll have a commercial, or there's an animation that they're working on, and there are specific lines. It's tangible, it's there, we can work on it. Other than that, it's a little bit too broad and too vague to even just to just say, oh, well, take this extra beat here, because like there's really nothing that you can really like grasp on there. It's just too vague. So, and
it's interesting to me though, is I'm not necessarily familiar with voice work or the sort of technique, and obviously if you've done opera, you have more projection techniques and different things that to do. But the idea of doing voice work and training for the timing aspect and things like, that's more probably comes more from like your sort of formal acting experience, right?
And on that note, there's a lot of like thought that needs to go into what kind of role that you're doing. Like I said, I come from the world of opera, where you don't have any mics, and you have to belt your heart out until you reach the cheap seats out in like the 80th row, and like that, and you have to look almost manic on stage to come off as mildly passive aggressive to the old lady with like spectacles in the back row. And
I love that.
And then translate that to film acting and voice work, where you have this nice little condenser mic in front of you, and all of that over emotion has to be condensed into just subtle little points, and you can't just go over the top. That's why you could point out a Broadway actor immediately, because they're overly dramatic to the point of pure annoyance sometimes. And like I remember being on sets with directors, whether it's for voice work or not, because if we're doing voice work at a home studio, it'll be this kind of setup where you'll be on Zoom and they'll be coaching you through things. The main thing that they'll tell you to do for first time film and voice actors is less. Give me less. And they're like, well, if I do any less, then I'm not going to be giving you anything. And like, that's the point. Real people aren't this dramatic. If they are, we
start to think there might be something wrong with them.
Exactly. And so it's so funny when you when you start hitting record on people, just how inhuman they start to act. They almost forget how to act human, and that's one of the biggest. And like that's one of the biggest things. Like in my role is to to not only be their coach, but at the same time play psychologist and just be like, no, like just be you, just be who you are. Don't try to put on a show. As soon as, we hit record, you're still you. You're still a person that talks like a regular person. Don't forget, like, you don't think about your beats or your pacing or your timing when you're just speaking. You just are. Like, the second you start thinking about it, everything seems fake.
That's a pretty good message too, though, not to overthink things.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, I can relate to that. I was somewhat of a shy kid. I was gonna say my name's John, by the way. I don't know if she said.
I'm sorry. Did I not? I thought I did.
I'm also Haley's stepbrother, so that's our introduction. But where are we going with this?
Shy kid.
Yep.
Yeah.
So like, I can totally relate to like being on the spot and locking up and stuff like that. I got over that as I got older and stuff like that, and I kind of got out of my bubble. Like I said, we probably had very different upbringings. I'm from a town about 800 people, and that was probably on a block that you lived on. So and once I got out of there, I kind of came out of my shell and stuff like that. But I was a very reserved child, so I can totally agree, relate to that.
Absolutely.
Do you get clients like that are maybe, or would you do? Sorry, how am I trying to ask this? Would you do training for people, maybe not necessarily just for people who are wanting to perform, but like maybe for people who are just like a little shy and just want to practice some, I don't know if social skills is the right way to say it, but like, that maybe some people could go to a service like you have for voice work and acting training, and that maybe that might kind of help them just to open up a little bit, get out of their shell a little bit.
The majority of my clients they fall within that gray area of, person who doesn't take that leap and, in kind of acquire those skills and work on them, and then, aspiring film and Broadway actor. There's so many people in the middle of that who are just working a 9 to 5. They're in their office cubicle. They grew up very shy and they don't really know how to connect. And I did a lot of work in comedy improv out in Boston, and half of our classes were just corporate sponsored events. It was just a tool in night out in learning how to public speak, how to give a presentation, how to just turn your brain off and not think, and say that people aren't worried about you succeeding. They just care that you're trying. That's the same. That's what comedy improv is. Nobody cares if you succeed or if you make them laugh. What makes them laugh is that they see you trying and you're giving your best effort. And you can only do that if you can just turn your brain off and just be natural. And so a lot of the people that I'll have, because there are some people who, they see the allure of Hollywood or Broadway and, they want to go for that. But to a lot of people, most of my clients, that's kind of off-putting. They don't want that as their end goal. They just want to learn how to be able to speak more without having like a panic attack. They want to be able to talk without having every sentence end with an upper inflection. So it makes everything that they're saying sound like a question, even though they're really confident in what they're saying. And
that's interesting.
Right. There are so many little things that they're like, well, I'm giving this presentation. Why are people not taking me seriously? And it's like, well, let's analyze how you're speaking, how you're presenting that information. You could have Stephen Hawking level discoveries, but if you talk about it like you're not sure of your own material, then nobody's going to take it seriously because you're the one, you're the face of it, you're the voice of it. So like, how are you going to present it? I think I show them TED Talks. I'll refer them to the King's Speech. It doesn't matter what your status is. It doesn't matter what material you have. If you can't deliver it, to their satisfaction, then you might as well have not put in any of the work.
One of the best tools for me to kind of get over that completely was I kind of threw myself to the wolves. I became a Harley salesman.
Wow.
So
you ultimate public speaking.
You either survive or you don't. I kind of put myself in a position to either make money or be poor. So it's when you put a commission based on how you speak to people and how you gain a relationship, then you more or less see a value in it. It's improv all day.
Yeah,
you're bouncing,
absolutely.
So Yeah,
Yep.
that was a
Yep.
very eye-opening thing for me.
I bet Harley customers must be ruthless.
It's a lot of kind of just like don't just kind of desensitize yourself to what they're saying because you
Yeah.
get in a lot of awkward conversations,
Oh, I
stuff
bet.
you kind
I
of
bet.
want to avoid, but you want to sell the bike. So, so you're just like,
Yep.
you just kind of like, yeah, man, I get it.
Hmm.
I get it.
Yeah.
You say that a lot, but yeah,
Yeah.
Harley,
Yeah.
there's a lot of different
Hmm.
people that buy
Yep.
Harleys.
Yeah. Like,
Oh,
so
go ahead.
sorry, go ahead.
No,
I,
you
Go
go
I was
ahead.
gonna
ahead.
say, like one of the main tools that we'll use in comedy improv is it's just a very simple game called Yes and a lot of
Mhm.
like non-improv people have heard of it, where somebody will say something to you, they'll propose
Yeah.
something, and there's the point of the game is to not say no at all, to only say yes and to that, to be able to build on it, and then you're just feeding off of each other with the conversation. So I apply that to a lot of people who come to me who are salesmen or
Yeah.
salespeople, and the point of the game is like it's like writing a character, and most characters these days have this kind of yes and feature built into them, where
Yeah.
there's a scene, they want something at the end of the scene, and they'll do and say
Mhm.
anything, to get that. Like I think literally back to, I see your Game of Thrones poster in the back.
There you
Um,
go.
there's a
Mhm.
scene where the Hound is about to die after he just fought with Brienne of Tarth, and Arya, she's just standing there, and he's saying anything that he can to try to get her to kill him, and she won't, and he'll say, and
Yep.
it gets worse and worse and worse to the point where he just starts begging
Yep.
to die at the end. And it's like, what do you have to say to get what you want? And it's always a game of yes and, because if you don't expect the no and I don't want the bike, you're going to be tongue tied and you're going to lose the sale. If you
Well,
keep building on what they say, then yeah.
well, like
Mhm.
one thing I learned, the best sales strategy for a Harley salesman is act like you don't care if you sell that bike. That's the furthest thing from your mind. I don't
Yeah.
care. You want
Hmm.
like that bike? What don't you like about it? Just ask them questions, pick their brain. It's a psychological game, really. And then another thing is you always have a line.
Hmm.
Like if they a lot of people say, well, let me think about it. So I would always tell them, if you think long, you think wrong.
Yeah.
And then
I
and then I
kind of,
would hit them.
I might
"Mhm,
steal that from you just for my
do it.
everyday life.
That's
It's a
actually
good
pretty
line.
good.
Follow that with about a minute of silence. Just stare at the bike with them and let them just stew in that. That's how you
Hmm.
sell a bike. It
Yeah.
it's a lot of awkward because people are impulsive.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's a lot of awkward sitting there not saying a word and just waiting.
Yeah.
If you the
Yeah.
next person that makes a move, you lose. You know what I
Yep.
mean? It's a
Yep.
psychological game. I'm trying to
Yeah.
steal your wallet.
It's so
You know what I mean?
it's really underestimated how powerful silence and eye contact is.
Yep. Mhm.
Yeah, it's
Yep.
really powerful in like in
Hmm.
situations like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Oh,
for sure.
people,
I
Yeah.
yeah,
mean,
people want to fill the silence 100%.
Yep.
because
Yep.
people, I don't know, there's a comfort in noise and
Hmm.
stuff like that. It's
Well,
in
Hmm.
we're,
the focus isn't on you, more or
Yeah.
less.
Yep.
hmm
So if
Absolutely.
you put the focus directly on them and you're not saying a word, just staring at them, staring at a bike, they'll make a move.
Yeah. Yeah.
Really,
there you go. You can
Yeah.
borrow that for your clients then.
Yep.
there
No,
you
that
go.
sounds perfect.
I love it. So with your acting work then and your voiceover work and things like that, do you have any like things that you're currently working on, or do you have I guess maybe things that you're looking to try to work on?
Well, so personally, in my own career, I'm looking to get more into the actual, into more union work.
Okay.
Now that all of the strikes are pretty much done for
Right.
the most part,
Mm-hmm.
we can start focusing a little bit more on that. Um, well, yeah, getting more into union work, which of course you're just jumping into an ocean of other, you know, performers and actors. So there's so much hard. It's harder, but at the same time, there's work everywhere. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
everybody is looking for voiceover work, and it was like that before COVID. But then COVID just catalyzed the push towards at home studio
Mm-hmm.
remote content. Um, And then you're obviously more marketable if you can do different types of voices. I was trained more towards the dramatic side, but I've always been a fan of, like shows like Who's Line, and not growing up with, but being influenced by people like Tim Conway and Carol Burnett and Dana Carvey, who can just manipulate their voices into
Dana
just
Carvey.
insane characters. And I fall victim to that too sometimes, just being so, my career being so focused on the voice, that I call like master of disguise syndrome, where I'll hear somebody speaking interestingly, and then without even a second thought, audibly just mimic them, to a fault, to an absolute fault, and to a lot of anger. But
I think that would just be so fun. I would enjoy that. I think that
it's
would be
unbelievable.
Hilarious.
I used to work at like my first job was like at a grocery store, and then like I would try like every day. I would try the entire day as like with a different accent. And there's nothing more off-putting to like Sunday morning churchgoers than like an Asian man with an Irish accent. So,
that's pretty great.
And so
that's great.
Yeah, and that's just like followed to my last name, just coming in, with an Irish last name. I'm adopted from South Korea, and most people, if I'm going for a job, they'll see my last name and then they'll see my headshot, and they're like, well, like one of these things is not like the other, and I'm like, yeah, like an enigma. So like trying to show, like, expand my repertoire into just giving them the most unexpected reason. Like a lot of people will ask for a specific voice type, but then for because now everything is about inclusion from a specific race, but they'll always take you if you can actually do the job. That's the first, first and foremost. So expanding my own repertoire, but at the same time expanding my clientele of people that I can train. And Zoom, like I didn't really do a lot of online voice work because I didn't trust my own speakers. If I was giving somebody a lesson over, a voice lesson over Zoom, or even like a piano lesson, I didn't trust that I was going to be able to catch and pick up everything through, my MacBook speakers. But now technology has gotten to the point where like I can trust that. So expanding my repertoire to almost, I have a couple clients in Canada and a couple in Spain, but other than that, that's as far as my international reach goes. But I'd love to branch us out into something more than just performative. Right now it's mainly performative, mainly public speaking, but I'd like to branch it out into something a little bit more psychological, if I can, to give people the chance to find a sense of confidence in their voice, not just so they can present a presentation, because the people who are coming to me for public speaking, they have a specific project in mind, that it's crunch time and they really need a couple lessons to really just bring it home. I'd really like to open it up to have it be a little bit more transformative in their life, and making small strides in that. I haven't really thought too much into it, but that's kind of like where I am now. I've seen the performance aspect of it. Now I want to see more it become a little bit more internal.
I like that. That's really so. I mean, almost kind of like sort of life coaching, or I don't know, what would you, maybe confidence coaching? Like, I think that is something that could be really interesting to get into, and definitely almost therapeutic, right? Like, because you are helping people to sort of get to a place where they're more comfortable with themselves to be able to communicate.
Right, exactly. Like the actors that I work with, they understand that acting is just reacting. So yes, you have to put yourself in the shoes of this character, but it gets to the point where you understand, you understand exactly what this character is going to do, but you believe in yourself so much that you believe that you are this character. It's no longer, the Hound doing it. I am this person feeling this pain, doing this. And that's what I'm trying to show in like a very watered down, simpler way to my other clients who aren't trying to be actors, that your speech and how you speak is only a reflection of what you believe inside, is a result of your confidence in your self-efficacy and your self-worth. And it really, yes, you can manipulate your voice and these cadences and these pauses and things like that, but they're only going to feel the confidence if you actually believe in yourself. And
I really like that. I think that is a very novel way to go about things. I think you could really pop off and do well with that because I think there's a lot of people out there just looking for ways to assist themselves in having better mindset, more positive mindset, more confident mindset. And I think there's a lot to what you say, that there's a lot of the ideas of acting and becoming a new character, and sort of it's like you have to build the character that you want to be and believe in that and speak from that place.
Yep, exactly. And you can take the same sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, I'm sure getting on stage without confidence is an absolute nightmare. So you have to build, like as far as comedy too.
Yeah.
It's like you have to have somewhat, if you're gonna go up there and present something as almost like a truth, you have to be confident in what you're presenting.
Yeah.
But, sorry, go ahead.
No, that's fine. Don't let any actor ever tell you that they don't have stage fright. Every single actor has stage fright, but they go off and do it anyways, because if they didn't care about what the audience thought, then their performance would just seem deflated and like untruthful. But no, every single person cares so much. And yes, I still get stage fright, but I do it anyway. I mean, I do it for a living, because there's nothing like that rush and adrenaline. And I can take the same exercises for my actor clients and juxtapose them onto my non-actor clients, because they'll come to me, and the majority of those people, corporate people, usually, looking for, give a speech, they'll say, I just want to sound confident. And I'm like, okay, well, what about being confident? Why don't we we can wax a car, we can buff everything, give you new tires, but why don't we look under the hood? Because otherwise the car is going to break down regardless of how nice it looks like on the outside. We can polish it up for the next few minutes, but why don't we just work on being confident? So I can take the same actor exercises and just making a complete fool out of yourself for a good hour at a time, and just having fun and turning that part of your brain off that's just so unbearingly nervous and worried about what other people think, and just work on your it's almost it's a form of audible meditation. I try to tell them, where you can really just let yourself loose and be confident, and then we do that so much that becomes the norm, and then we'll work on your public speaking, because now you actually have a foundation to build off of that.
I love this. I think you should have a YouTube channel where you have your own training videos that you give for people, for not just the being confident in public speaking and the mindset. I think you're on the verge of something very cool here. I'm very excited.
Thanks. I'm working on it. My end goal is a TED Talk, but I'll get there.
There you go.
I absolutely can see it. I don't know who I need to talk to or whose petition I need to sign, but you definitely need to give a TED Talk, because I think I'm sitting here thinking to myself, I think I could use your services. I just want to have a couple hours of being fun and silly and outrageous and not worrying about what anyone thinks, just for my own mental health sake, just to build a little bit of fun times, right? Keep the good vibes rolling.
And honestly, that's where Zoom and working remotely has kind of helped me a little bit, because if I don't know them for the first time and I'm meeting them in person, it is very off-putting to not only say hey, I'm going to help you on your self-esteem, but then to ask that person to completely not go above and beyond anything that they've ever dreamed of doing in their normal life. Say they're an accountant, and we're like, okay, you're going to act like a monkey and you're going to roll around on this ground for a good few minutes until I say stop. And they're like, absolutely not. And so
absolutely not.
And I was like, all right, you got a point there. But working through Zoom, at the very least, they're in the comfort of their own home. Again, ask them to do something, at least while seated, and be like, all right, I'm going to turn my camera off, and you do X, Y, and Z, or something like that, or you'll hear me and I'll start speaking, and then whenever you want to chime in, feel free to. And they're surrounded by something that they know, they're comfortable. I'm not meeting them in a studio somewhere or in a dance studio. and people seem to be a little bit more receptive of that because, you know, they feel safe. And that's the biggest issue with asking somebody to kind of bare their soul into, not into alter, you know, the very fabric of like who they've been for, you know, the past few decades, and getting out of that comfort zone. And it's like, well, to do that, they need to be as comfortable as possible. And like up until right now, like I'm a complete stranger. You know, how do I instill that trust and that comfort? And yeah, like, you are kind of playing, you know, therapist for most of the time. And
well,
it's
because
really
you do have to, it's, you know, there's a little bit of therapist, but there's definitely some teacher, almost, you know, sort of elementary school teacher, maybe a little bit, right? Having to create a safe space for someone to be who they are, and you know, having a lot of, I'm sure, patience yourself, right? Because to try to coax that out of some people who are more reluctant, right? I'm sure can be challenging.
Yeah, and I learned that from when I was in the public education system. The schools that I taught, the elementary schools that I taught, were in like the bottom 3% of both New York and Massachusetts.
Oh,
and
wow. Okay.
Those kids, you know, it was the inner city. I knew exactly the schooling that I came from, and I knew those kids weren't going to have any problems getting the opportunities that I had. It was these kids that weren't going to have any of it, and all they needed was that one teacher to be able to show them that, you know, there were opportunities, there are ways out of their situation. You know, they're just, you know, they just happen to be born into this situation to no fault of their own, and they can control, you know, as much as they possibly can to get out of it. And it was tough because yes, you're trying to create that safe space for them. You have these 6 hours compared to the other, you know, the other 18, where they, you know, there's a good chance that they could unlearn everything that you're trying to instill in them. But school is their safe place. And it was kind of like that for me, but I knew that I was going to be safe when I was at home. And I would, in the first few years I was working, you know, like I just couldn't figure out why these kids weren't paying attention, why they weren't doing their homework. And it was like, okay, well, because this one just had to, you know, go get his father and bail his father out of jail at, you know, and from the third grade. This one just had to deal with yet another death in the family. I'm like, all right, school is on the back burner, and survival for this third grader is top priority for them. And I was like, I had to change my entire methodology of teaching to creating more of a safe place to be, you know, to create, use music as a tool, music and performing as a way for them to actually express themselves. Because if I don't, they're going to become cold and hardened, and it's going to get worse every single year. And it's like, this needs to be their haven where they can just be them and be a kid. And yes, we'll work on the motor skills and all the other stuff that they're supposed to work on. But at the same time, like, this like needs to be the place that they look forward to.
But I really think that coming from that sort of a place is more where all of education needs to be. It's not just about the functionality things, the you know, like you said, motor skills, or again, math, whatever it is, you know, cultivating a space where kids learn to express themselves in general. Right. And to have that confidence to express themselves. I think you should probably write a book about that too, on top of the YouTube channel that you're going to be starting. You think you need to write a memoir is what you need to be working on also?
I probably should, because the first question on the TED Talk application is how many, like, please provide the links to all the books that you've written. So,
well, there you go.
Which is why I didn't spend much time on that application.
I think you absolutely need to sit down and write a memoir about your times teaching in the inner city, and I think that's where you need to start.
Yeah, definitely. Man, what was I going to say? Yeah, it's so daunting, especially kids, you know, like that, who don't have a lot of opportunities. When kids are young, when they're in kindergarten, they're so wide-eyed and open-handed, and, you know, if they don't know something, like, they'll still have a go at it, they'll still guess. And that's why, you know, like, when, you know, kids will just say the absolute craziest things, which is, you know, it's so adorable. It's amazing. And then somehow, like, throughout the years, as they get older, they're taught to be afraid to be wrong, where it's not okay, you know, to be wrong. There's only one answer. It's very black and white. It's very polarized, and they're afraid to, you know, to guess. And that kind of, that, you know, that trickle, you know, metastasizes into people being afraid to go up in public speak because they're afraid of constant judgment. There's a certain image and there's a certain way that certain, they're supposed to present, and they're supposed to way that's sorry, I'm so tongue-tied today.
No, you're fine.
Specific way that they're supposed to look and sound, and they're so afraid of being wrong.
And I think that especially, and we're big on talking about creative people, creativity. Yeah. If you don't feel safe to express yourself, the creative spark is really dampened. And, I really do believe that the creativity is like the highest form of, human joy. And like, if you can find something that allows you to feel creative and express yourself in a creative way, like, I really do think that is such an enriching thing for any individual to be able to do. And, so I think it's so valuable, the things that you teach for people. Obviously, yeah, sure, they think of it in terms of their job, and they think of it in terms of, the confidence and being able to do functional type things. But it is a gateway to being able to tap into the creative part of you if you can feel safe to express yourself. And I really do think that's a really valuable thing for people.
Yeah, it really is. And along the way, they'll learn certain traits on a lot of it has to deal with empathy when you're speaking publicly, or you're learning how to voice act, because you're doing it to elicit a certain emotion out of the audience. Whether it's a fan base or it's just your peers. You're doing it to convince them of what you're trying to sell. And the only way that you can do that is if you know what they want, if you know how they feel, if you know their stance on a certain topic. The only way that you can really get them to agree with you in any way is if you understand where they are. And so it's very hard. I've seen actors that have gone on to Broadway who, they're amazing at their craft and they're very convincing, but they're missing one element. And it's that there's, some of them are just like unbelievably narcissistic that they can't really, at some point they lose the audience because it's all about them. And you can, it takes a little while to be able to hear something like that, but you can really hear it. And it's the difference between a 95% performance and 100% knock out the park. And a lot of it is, it goes the other way. So, this person's lack of self-worth and then their overabundance of self-worth.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It can go either way. You have to have a very holistic approach. Right.
Yeah.
And I do think that's great, though. It does sound like you really do, you come at it from all angles. And I think that that's really amazing. I am so excited to see your YouTube channel and to see your TED Talk. Like, I think it's going to be fabulous.
I hope so too.
So go ahead, John.
I was going to say, I got a really interesting question that I came up with for you. So you have a show, right? An animated show. You are a character in this animated show. What actor plays your voice?
Oh, dear
Dead
God.
or alive? Like mine is Robin Williams.
That's a good one. That's a good one. So does it have to sound like you?
No, it could be anybody.
Okay, mine would probably be, he doesn't fit my aura or my energy at all, but Jeremy Irons.
Okay.
Jeremy Irons is one of my favorite voice actors ever since I heard him in Scar, as Scar in Lion King. He's just got that slow British drawl, either that or Michael Caine, but Michael Caine sometimes sounds like he's about to fall asleep. But
a little bit.
So I don't know. I don't know what it.
Yeah, as far as sounding like because Robin Williams, he would be just over the top, and so I would want that on Robin Williams.
If you need if you wanted to show somebody just a quick portfolio of Robin Williams's work, all you have to do is just show them "Friend Like Me" from Aladdin.
Yeah.
Oh,
and he does 20,000 voices in that. Yep. So there you go.
Yep, for sure.
Yeah.
I think I would pick Gilda Radner. I think.
Really?
Yeah.
That's a name you don't hear a lot.
The Judy Miller show, I feel like that was me as a child, just entertaining myself in my room alone because, that's what I had to do. So, I would pick Gilda Radner.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's funny. Did you grow up as an only child?
Oh no.
Oh.
There were siblings I was trying to get away from.
Oh.
John, I love you. I was no, yeah, I was I don't know. I suppose I kind of isolated out of maybe not shyness necessarily, but feeling sort of like I was different or misunderstood. Like I wanted to be creative, I wanted to be expressive, and it wasn't necessarily supported, kind of
Yeah.
thing. So, can you talk a little bit about your growing up experience then? Because it sounds like it was very colorful and very interesting, and you had some exposure to this sort of industry of entertainment at a young age, right?
Yeah. The good thing, like the family that I guess I can never figure out this phrase right because I never really use it, was adopted into my adoptive parents.
Okay.
Those parents, like they
They're
never
your
questioned.
parents, right? Like
Essentially,
right?
I was adopted at 5 months old. Like,
so you don't know any different.
Right, exactly. No, like I'm Italian for all I know.
You could be, maybe they did.
There are times where like I'll walk. When I was a kid, I like grew up with Irish, on one side and Italian on the other, where I, just partake in all these Irish and Italian festivities, and I'd walk by a mirror and be like, oh yeah,
right.
well, there it is.
That's right.
Yeah.
That must be an interesting sensation in terms of like identity, right?
Oh yeah, definitely. And that has played a big part in my sense of self as an actor. Growing up in such a racially diverse, because they're two very fair-skinned people, and like my whole family, great family, but you never could help from kind of feeling like the black sheep a little bit, not in sense of like not like them loving you, but in school when take your bring your parent in to for school day or something like that, you would see, oh, like this kid looks like their parent, they have these features, and then to other strangers, you would almost have to be like, no, this is my mom, like I can go home like with this person, my mom's picking me up. And it's like, that's so daunting because I didn't realize that as a kid before, but it did kind of affect me in the sense that no other kid had to really justify why they belonged to this family. And that was a real chip on my shoulder for a long time. It's like, okay, what does it mean? I take a lot from Lin-Manuel Miranda, and his show In the Heights. It was all about, what does it mean to be a minority if you don't live in that country? What does it mean to bring that culture here? And how do you kind of juxtapose that onto like the American like lifestyle, or the lifestyle that you're given to you? The good thing is that my parents gave me the freedom to be able to explore anything that I wanted. Yes, my dad kind of wanted me more on the sports side, but I had this nice little High School Musical dichotomy growing up in high school. But when I told them that I wanted to do the arts, they had already seen all the opportunities that the arts had provided me before. So they're like, okay, if you hadn't shown us that you could do this and it couldn't like, reap some benefits and rewards, for the future, probably wouldn't have like been on board with it. But, like you've already shown that you can do it, and we support you and we love what you're doing, and like, yeah, like go for it. Like they were nothing but supportive. But then going back to your point, or you were saying about like your lifestyle as a child, I grew up as an only child. My dad survived cancer in his 20s, but he couldn't have kids as a side effect, so they decided to adopt. And I was adopted in the mid 90s, and we were just it was just at the turning point of like technology where when I was like maybe 10 years old, instant messaging became a thing. And then you started being able to kind of communicate with people that way. But if you wanted to have friends, like as an only child, if you wanted to have friends, you had to put yourself out there. You had to go outside and find friends. You couldn't just text them or, instant message them. You had to put yourself out there. And I was a shy kid. I wasn't popular by
and you
any
don't
means.
have siblings to take along with you so that you're just at least, have somebody around. Yeah.
Yep. All my social skills were developed through school and playing with friends. Like luckily the neighborhood I was in had a lot of my friends around there, so I didn't have to go that far. But if I didn't have that, I probably would have been much more introverted. And I think I still was fairly introverted growing up. I was fairly shy, very insecure because I didn't know who I was. Adopted kids don't get enough credit. A lot of people, when they hear that somebody is adopted, they're like, "Oh, that's so interesting," and it definitely is interesting. It's a great story, but there's a lot of mental work that has to be done, especially if you're in such a starkly interracial household.
Right.
There's a lot of
Because
like
you can't help if someone, you know, an outside person
mm,
comes into the house. It's
mm,
like, you're the one who's different. And
yeah,
there's
you
no hiding it kind of thing,
Yeah. And sometimes, and this is kind of where like I wouldn't say too much empathy, but being able to kind of understand where people are coming from came through, because I noticed that when I would, when I was in high school, like I noticed that when I would speak to somebody for the first time, they didn't quite know how to speak to me because, because, maybe being adopted, maybe like being Asian. But the second I started connecting with them on things that they enjoyed, that they
hmm
appreciated, like, hey, I love Lincoln Park, like, hey, like, I like roller
Okay.
coasters and things like that. Like,
hmm
oh, okay. And then the wall started coming down. It's like, so as soon as I started giving them some sort of connection, and mutual feeling, then the walls started coming down. They started feeling more comfortable. So I took that into my teaching and saying,
hmm
okay, first you have to create a space before you even start teaching. Because if somebody doesn't feel comfortable and they don't feel like they can trust you, then you're never going to be able to impart any kind of wisdom on them,
hmm
Yeah.
or influence them in any way. And so I just had a lot of time to study people. One of my favorite things to do, even to this day, is just people watch, because you
hmm
can learn
Yeah.
a lot from just listening and watching.
Yep.
Mhm.
And so,
It's,
but yeah.
that is really, it's kind of fun to think though that, the way that your life sort of unfolded, right? And because of your
Mm,
childhood, it did give you an edge to some degree in what it is that you're doing, right?
mm-hmm,
Because you learned
mm-hmm,
that skill and you had to sort of teach yourself how to get people to open up and let loose. And,
mm-hmm,
I think it's really great, good for you that you have been able to tap into that in a really positive way and to channel that into something that is something really
mm-hmm,
positive, not just for you in terms of obviously like income and supporting yourself, but
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
adding value and giving value to others. Like I think that's really great.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Mhm.
Um,
So I was gonna ask you, so I'm a musician. I just play music.
mhm,
I
yeah,
didn't really do any acting or comedy or anything like that. But
yeah.
what's your favorite kind of music? Like what's your favorite music to listen to? Or do you have
I'm
situational like favorites? Like
That's
do you listen
pretty
to
much
this?
that. Yeah, like,
Okay.
I just short of maybe like classic rock, I'll
Okay.
pretty much listen to everything, whether it's like, whether it's indie, obviously classical, but like indie, folk, alternative, punk,
Mhm.
screamo, EDM,
Mhm.
hip hop, R&B,
Okay.
like you name it. Like I'm a big fan of like foreign music, like, like Hispanic music, like Bad Bunny, Ozuna, like
Okay.
but at the same time, like heavy metal bands, like
Yep.
I'll go to a show and find myself, not maybe now that I'm a little older, maybe not be in a mosh pit, but I'll be a
Yep.
healthy observer from the back.
I'm the old guy on the corner of the mosh pit with his arm out like this, just stopping
Yeah.
people.
I think the last show I went to pre-COVID was like a day to remember.
Oh,
But
nice. Okay.
yeah. But
Haleigh
This
was the last show you've been to.
the last show I've been
Yeah.
to.
Yeah.
Oh,
Concert. Let's hear it.
concert. I think probably it's been a hot minute. Fallout Boy. It's been a while.
Okay.
oh, there, wow.
I mean, they're
How was
great. It
that?
was it
Oh
it
yeah.
was definitely one of my favorite concerts I've ever been to for just the energy of the
Hmm.
crowd and the
Yeah.
environment, and like their new album had just come out when I went to this
Hmm.
I mean, this was years ago, but like the energy of the crowd, right, was just
Yep. Yeah.
fantastic because everybody's excited about all the new songs, right?
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well,
Wow.
I live in Fargo, so we don't get a whole lot coming through.
Hmm.
But the last concert I went to was the Melvins, if you're familiar with them.
Yeah, I've heard of them.
Mhm.
Yeah,
I
they're an
mean,
older
but
band. I don't know how old you are. I'm 35, so
I was gonna
I'm a
say,
I'm
little older than.
29.
don't
Okay, yeah,
call yourself old. I'll be 37 in a couple of days, and I don't want to
I
hear it.
know, I know.
So you guys
Age
had
of
already kind of established like, how to communicate with people by the time like AIM came out and texting and things like that.
That is something that's interesting to me because, you're less than a decade younger than me. It doesn't seem like it should be such a gap in the experience that we had, right?
Yeah.
But it really is because, you say you had to put yourself out there, even though your peers at the time would have been doing the instant messaging and shifting things to like this online world that we have now. Whereas John and I, your parents kicked you out, go play outside, and you just had to go play outside and meet people because like we're not having you in the house. Get out, kind of thing.
And like we kind of grew up in this weird little like buffer like zone because we didn't have a whole lot of internet. It was there, but no one ever was on it like they are now. Like you didn't have a phone in your pocket. You know what I mean? Like And then all of a sudden, all this stuff started coming out. But I remember being a kid and just having to play out. So, like, the community I grew up into was a small town. It was probably 800 people.
Well, and that's different, too. That's the safety element, obviously. Yeah. But to that degree, too, you sort of having to put yourself out there as an only child in a city situation. Like, that's a lot of confidence you had to build to be alone in... and to go make friends and to go meet people.
And, I think it was about when I was like 10 years old, 5th grade, that like AIM started becoming a thing. MySpace became a thing. So I had like 10 years to be, I know, God.
Remember the days of MySpace, how fun it was to design your website. Yep.
I put so much on my page that mine would never load. It would always crash my computer. So I never really got to enjoy it. But I had 10 good years of being able to learn like how to be a real kid. And my parents were the same way. They're like, oh, you're going to have summer vacation, but you're not going to spend it inside. Like, you have to pick at least one camp and we'll pick the other one for you. And like, all right, fine. Yeah. And like, so, I was like always going out. And then like, so at least I developed the social skills that I needed before all that stuff came out, before like PS2 became a thing. And, things kind of like drive me inward, because as an only child, if that was a thing, as soon as I was born and I could function and understand it, like my nephews now, like I would just revert inward, and that would have been like the worst thing for me. The trajectory of my life would have changed dramatically. And I say that to a lot of my clients when they're going for a role. I'm like, even if it's a small role, your character, the present form of your character is a product of 1,000 different little decisions and choices and events prior. Like you change one of them, you change how you sound and how you act now. It's like, make those decisions as to like what happened, what had to build to be that character. And I think back like to me, and like it's very easy to relate to, or like for each person, like think about where you are now, all the little happenstance things that had to happen for you to be you right now. Like
that to me gets a little bit fun when I start to play the game of, okay, but if you want to be a different character as if you're an actor in your life in order to create a new mindset for like a new reality shift that you want to create for yourself, right? That you may have to start reevaluating the perspectives you have of past decisions and maybe start seeing or past experiences, right? And say, maybe that didn't happen how I think it happened. Right? And really kind of rewrite the story of the past for yourself to become a new you in the present.
Yeah. I mean, like some of the best episodes like of shows that I love, like the entire episode, like a third of it will be told from the perspective of this one character, then like from this character, like which one do you believe? It's like, well, you take all of them and then you kind of like figure out the average and the mean, and like maybe one is obviously right, but still like like sometimes, like, most of the time actually, like we're like the worst people to evaluate our own lives.
Right, because you see it from the way you experience it, but you're not. That's kind of something that I do find interesting about even just podcasting, right? To go watch myself later, and I'm gonna, now that we've talked, I'm gonna overanalyze my voice probably a little bit and ask myself, like, am I inflecting at the end? What am I? How am I doing this? But it is interesting to watch it and kind of oh, I didn't know that I sounded that way, or I didn't know I had this kind of tick or mannerism that I do, you know. So it does become interesting when you do this kind of work, right? That you have to be able to, I'm not, how would you define it? I guess because you have to see your own work, hear your own work, and I guess allow it and not be your worst critic, which we all kind of tend to be.
There are many people who will just record once and not give it a second thought, not even touch it, not even come close to listening to it, and they'll just send it out. And then I'll listen to it and I'm like, you did listen to this, right? And they're like, no, why? I was like they're like, I really don't like to listen to my own work. Almost like, well, you really should, because listen to that. But like, you know, when we're speaking, we don't even really hear our own voice. What we're hearing is, or we're feeling, is the vibrations of our inner ears and like phonation of that inside. So we're only hearing it within our own headspace, but then it sounds usually pretty different when you hear it back on a recording. And like, that's the actual voice that we're hearing. And so, you know, it's you know, it's kind of like another person, you know, sending it back to you, being like, no, this is how you actually sound. You know, this is, you know, you're saying, oh, this is the way my life went, and they're saying, no, this is how your life actually went. And it's so different because like you're trying to, for the people who are trying to be actors, it's a different ball game with them than it is to people who are just looking to public speak and build confidence, because the performers, the musicians, and the actors, you know, they'll work on their confidence on their own. They kind of have it, some really don't. But
that's where you come in to try to help them out and guide them.
When they act, you know, the performance and just the performing arts is just brutal. And when you have people who are constantly telling you no and judging you coldly, what's wrong with you? And a lot of them will give you these weird reviews, like they're almost like they're wine tasters. They're like, I'm getting little notes of melancholy or depression, and I'm looking for something that's a little bit more, you know, I'm a little bit more quaint, and I'm like, this is a voice. This isn't, you know, a Chardonnay. But they will put you through the ringer, you know, if you're not ready for
a certain flavor.
You are, you know, and the hardest thing, like, you kind of have to pick up the pieces afterwards, because they're looking for a product, and the product is your voice. You just kind of happen to be attached to it. And so being okay with that, you're volunteering yourself to sell your voice to them, you know, your personality, your persona, what you can do with that voice. You're just selling an instrument pretty much. And you know, and it's just as important to people like that to remain confident and calm and like know who they are and be like, okay, yes, they want this one thing from me, but I am the reason why this is so marketable. Like, I am the reason why this is so successful. But it's, you know, it can be very, very tough on, you know, people's like self-worth. And a lot of time you'll find performers only are performing because they like that adoration. You know, they crave that, you know, like if you're one person standing on a stage of thousands of people, I don't care who you are, that gets to you. You know, like, you know, that kind of stardom gets to you, and it's very, you know, I can attest to it. It's extremely addictive.
The chemicals that your brain creates when you have that kind of adrenaline rush, I'm sure especially when you get that energy of a happy crowd, especially, right? To know that you elicited that reaction has to like, it can't not do things to your brain, because it makes your brain create all those chemicals.
It's like, I don't even know. It's tough to describe, but I've ridden some of like the world's tallest and fastest roller coasters, and none of them even hold a candle to like a second on like a stage, like on, you know, going down to like Carnegie Hall or like the Lincoln Center. Like, they don't hold a candle to just a second of adoration on that stage.
I love it.
It's mind blowing.
And that's what keeps you going, though, isn't it? Chasing after that is what keeps you going.
And
I was going to ask you, so when you're like voice acting and stuff, how do you have any like rituals, I guess you could say, like that you do to kind of put yourself in that headspace, or kind of give yourself like a launch point, like I'm ready now, I'm going to do it. Because like when I was a salesman, I would basically, somebody walks to the door, I'd basically stare at the wall, I'd say hello, and I'd basically stare at the wall for 60 seconds.
Yeah.
60 seconds, I turn and I go. That's
Yeah.
Doesn't matter where they are. 60 seconds is my up point. You know what I mean?
Are you thinking of anything during those 60 seconds?
No, I don't even look at them. I want it to come to me in the next 10 steps, what I'm going to say to them.
Nice.
So like I think for me to wait that long and stare at them, I'm getting too much stuff in my head that I'm overthinking. I don't want to see anything they're looking at. I don't even want to see the bike they're looking at. I want to look at the wall, turn around 60 seconds, and then whatever they land on, and then let's go have a conversation.
Yeah, no, that works.
That's good. Yeah.
So, vocal warm-ups and all the physical, technique work aside, like there are always those rituals, getting ready for that and making sure, that your body is in the space, kind of is ready for whatever you need to do. If you're physically acting, if you're crying, things like drinking water, because there are no tears if you haven't drank any water. But for things like voice acting, you say it's like a very dramatic thing where you're in a very, very traumatizing scene. If I can do it from home, first off, memorize the scene. Memorizing the scene, that's students will come to me and be like, oh look, like I've memorized it. I'm like, okay, good, that's step one. Good.
Yep.
And like, what do you mean that's step one? I was like, step one is learning the words on the page. Now that you learn the words on the page, now let's put some emotion to it, and now let's really feel them, and now let's sell them. So memorizing, going through them in my head a little bit, but to the point where I can just think about something else and then come right back to it. I'm not reciting it in my head to make sure that I don't forget them. It's it's a part of me, and that takes probably a couple days to really do. Then I'll start taking long walks and getting myself kind of into that space. Even if I'm voice acting, I'll change my body language a little bit. If I'm like, you can see in like some of Robin Williams's recordings, like most people who do voice acting, they'll act right in front of the microphone, despite the fact that nobody is really looking at them. Some animators now will actually take that footage and incorporate that into the animation, but whatever you have to do to feel that character, to kind of put yourself in that headspace, I'll do. So I'll walk around and I'll just start thinking about whatever the situation is, and like whether I ever have to think about, to the point where I really start believing it. And then the second I do, I don't waste a second. I'll keep the mic recording the entire time, even on my walk, and then I'll walk right back in and go. And kind of like you, where I won't really think about it too much. Like I'll think about everything about the scene except for the actual lines, because if I think about the lines too much, they're not genuine. Most people don't speak, if they're speaking passionately, they're not real. They don't have a lot of time to think about what they're going to say, because then it would just seem too premeditated.
It's just
flowing.
Right?
Yep. Which is why it's so important to really memorize them to the point where you don't have to think about them, and then you can call back on them without them feeling too arbitrary and rehearsed. So yeah, I do. It's a lot of walking, not as much talking.
Everyone has their process, And then there's people that ask me like, how can you walk up to people and do that? I'm as nervous as anyone else. I just don't show it. You know what I mean? I don't shake hands because sometimes I get sweaty palms because I'm nervous. You know what I mean? It's don't be a handshaker. Give them a good old bump. Follow through with your day.
But then you have the commission as an incentive. To kind of like push that extra mile, to really like try to do everything you can to make that sell. So
well, that's that's what I liked about it. It's a mind game, and you're trying to feed yourself. You're basically, how am I going to eat?
There's psychology on both ends, right? You got to get the psychology of the customer, and you have to like use your psychology to your advantage as much as you can.
I mean, you have a base pay. You're not balling by any means,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
you know, it's you depend on that commission to make up for what you're not making, and it's sometimes is tight enough to the point where you're like, I got to figure some stuff out.
You got to put the charm on real hard, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah, you schmooze them. Just be a schmoozer. 99% of life is schmoozing. Just do it.
I love it. That's great. So we do, like I said, I do want to be, respectful of your time. So don't want to keep you, forever.
It's been an hour. Wow.
I know, it's been such a great conversation. I know, I've really enjoyed this. I would love to have you come back and join John and I on our other podcast that we have if you would like to, because
definitely
so much great conversation going here. I really love it. But do you have so for the audience to find you, where can they find you and plug your services, plug what you have going on, if you've got anything coming up that you want people to know about?
Yep. So I'm putting everything through the new YouTube channel that I just started out, strictly from the perspective of a writer. So it's called Writer Reacts, but it's also the brand that I'm starting, Writers Unblocked, which is a program that I'm doing that's basically getting people over that hump of creativity block, whether it's writer's block or artistic block or musician's block, doing anything that they can to kind of get themselves over that hump. And it's really just through exploration. Not pushing yourself too hard, but just going out, exploring and learning. And so it's a channel just based on learning as much as we possibly can to use it for something that we're applying, in our creative space.
I love
so
that.
You can find that on YouTube and then obviously LinkedIn as well.
Cool.
Awesome. And we will share links in the description below. So go check out the links, check out CS. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you guys. Thank you guys so much.
Really, really great. Really do appreciate it. Thank you so much. CS Brennan, check him out.
Check it out.
Hi again, friends. That was our conversation with CS Brennan. Do check out the links below to find more of his information and check out his YouTube channel. We do hope he'll come back again for more conversation. That was such a good time. If you'd like to support more of the No Small Stories podcast, then you can subscribe to our Patreon. That's patreon.com/No Small Stories. And definitely follow us on Instagram at No Small Stories Podcast. Do all the things that listeners can do. Like, share, subscribe, comment, leave a review. Thank you so much again for tuning in and listening. And until next time, friends, wherever you are out there, I hope you're doing well.